Hey guys, on this episode we talked to a person that a lot of you may be very familiar with. It's Naheed Bardai, our principal. We talked about everything from his childhood to his later years in university and much, much more. This is one of the best conversations we had to date, and I think you'll enjoy it as well. So let's get right into it.
Welcome to the After Codes podcast.
Subscribe now!
Okay, guys, welcome to a new episode of After Codes. It's been a long winter break. We're ready to start again. We're going to start this year off with a special guest on our side, Naheed, our principal. Many of us probably know him as that. So, Naheed, you want to give us a brief introduction? Who are you? If I don't know you from playing floorball, who really are you?
So thank you for that. My name is Naheed Bardai. I'm the principal of UWC Atlantic. A great privilege to be in this role. I've been here now. It's my third year in this role. How do you describe yourself? I guess I'm a father. I'm a partner to Edwina, who also lives on campus. My two boys, Renan and Nabi. I'm an educator. I'm a teacher. I was at a school before this in Toronto. Before that in Mombasa in Kenya for 10 years. And fundamentally, I do what I do because I believe that our young people today deserve the best possible opportunity in education that they can possibly have. And I believe that the way in which I can have an impact is to help young people to be able to make good decisions about their futures and about their families and their communities in the hope of making a better world.
That's amazing. And again, thank you so much for joining us today. And before we go deeper into who you are and what you've done, I wanted to ask you, Naheed, do you believe there is alien life out there?
Oh boy. Yes. I think, have you seen the James Webb photographs recently?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, they are pretty amazing. And so it's hard to not believe that there is potentially something else out there. I would love to meet an alien one day.
How do you think that would look like?
I don't even think I could conceptualize what it looks like.
Yeah, fair
enough.
Okay, let's move over to our new segment on this podcast. We introduced something that's called 9 quick questions we wanted to ask you. So the gist of it is basically that we ask you one question and you answer with max like one sentence to keep it quick. So I will start off. So what is your biggest strength?
Love being around people.
Okay, then what's your biggest weakness?
Really wanting to make sure that I'm as in tune with what's going on around me from an emotional standpoint.
What's your favorite sport?
Oh, basketball.
What's your favorite food?
Sushi.
Favorite place you have ever been to?
Oh, that's a tough one. Mombasa, Kenya holds a soft spot in my heart.
Favorite movie?
A movie called Motorcycle Diaries.
Oh, I know that one.
Motorcycle Diaries. Okay.
South America. Yes, sir. It's a book. It's based on a book. Yeah.
And favorite place in the castle?
Other than my office, I would say a combination of the Great Hall or the dining hall. I'm going to go dining hall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Naheed. Good set of answers.
I pass.
So we can move on. So how we're gonna do this pretty much is we're gonna go a little bit through your life. We're gonna start obviously when you were a child and then in your teenage years. So
tell us something about where you grew up or what kind of environment, what place.
Yeah, so look, I was born in a part of Toronto called Rexdale, Ontario, and my parents came as immigrants to Canada from East Africa, and we managed to have a house because my parents won the house in a lottery because the government was trying to settle some of the outskirts of Toronto, and so we were lucky to have a house because of that, and that really shaped in many ways my upbringing. The idea of coming from an immigrant family. My dad was an early entrepreneur in the early 80s. I was born in 79, so in about 83 or so, he started his own software writing company. And so I was really shaped by being in a sort of traditional, typical, immigrant kind of household, in conjunction with a very aspiring and entrepreneurial household, was just a gift for me. And while we grew up relatively poor in Toronto, I remember us having to ration sort of like cookies, and that kind of thing when we were growing up. Taught me a lot of lessons about hard work, about family, about the importance of your education. That was always emphasized for me. And I had a sister, which was great growing up as well. I would play hockey on the street in the middle of the day or after school. Would often my religious community was quite strong at that time in my life, so I'd often spend some time there as well. A lot of fond memories of my childhood.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like, do you think that sort of entrepreneur background that you talked about, was that what led you to do business administration as your first bachelor's? Or did it not? It wasn't not related mainly.
No, it was a pretty big influence because my dream was actually to always take over my dad's business. Growing up, that was my ideal of what I wanted to do.
What is your dad's business, if we may ask?
So he started by owning one of the first software writing companies. So he wrote the first point of sales software for Ford Motors, for Wrigley's Gum in Canada, like these kinds of things, which is pretty crazy when you think about it in the early 80s.
Yeah.
And so then he moved sort of a bit away from that kind of space into the sort of data theft or online identity theft sort of space. And so as I was going in towards university, I was quite interested in actually taking over the business. And so my dad would always say to me, "You're not going to touch my business unless you have at least 2 degrees."
Okay.
And that's what he would say. So that was always an aspiration of mine. So actually the first part of my degree is in computer science.
Oh.
And then the second part of my degree is in business. So that's how I wanted to combine those 2 things together. But then I had a bit of a change of heart.
Okay.
And you got more than 2 degrees. So way more.
Yeah, but we'll get to that later.
We'll get to that later. First.
Okay. So just back to childhood. So you got a very standard Canadian childhood, I would say, right? So you got the chance to go to a normal public high school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Had plenty of friends, I presume.
It oscillated at times.
Okay.
I remember in my primary school, I was a bit of an awkward kid. I didn't really learn how to read until a little bit later. I was maybe a little bit socially awkward, and I figured it out for myself around maybe grade 5 that I was a bit socially awkward. I figured it out, and so when we moved neighborhoods to a different part of town, I almost felt like it was a chance for a refreshed start, you could say. And I think I was in grade 7 or something at that time, so about 12 or something. And yeah, so I did have a typical kind of childhood, but not without its ups and downs.
Yeah, of course. And do you have any defining experience you remember from your childhood? Something that had a very big impact on you as the type of person you're now today?
I mean, it was definitely the influence of my family and extended family was pretty significant. I think for some reason, the year I got my ear pierced, for some reason, I got actually both my ears are pierced actually. So I think I got my first ear piercing. I want to say maybe when I was 13 or 14.
Wow.
So I got the first one, the second one a year later. And for me, and I did both of them without my parents knowing. So that was one of the first times when I did something without my parents knowing, which was interesting.
It's also a defining experience, obviously, what Michael said earlier. Wow.
Would you get another piercing today?
I don't know.
Did you do it yourself, or did you go to a place? And
yeah, I'm not crazy.
Not
crazy. A lot of people who do it are crazy, but it takes a certain kind of experimentation to do that. But no, I definitely had it professionally done.
And then your teenage years. So for you, how was high school? Because you obviously touched on that you were a bit of an awkward kid, when you were younger. So how was that development then in high school? Did you become different? Were there maybe
a lot of things change in high school, right? You kind of
puberty,
get to be a new person if you move schools and stuff like that.
For sure. Well, I got tall really fast. So so for whatever reason, that helped. The height I am now was essentially my height when I was in grade 7.
Okay.
I didn't really grow too much since grade 7. And so I remember playing ice hockey I was never very good at ice hockey. I played for 3 years. I think I scored 3 goals in 3 years. And I was never very good. But in my last year, when I was in my new neighborhood, and for whatever reason, I was on skates, and so I was pretty tall relative to students, or the other kids my age. And I remember going to like the awards ceremony at the end of the year, and when they gave out this award for like, I don't know, like most improved player or something like that I got, and I stood up, and then people were like, "Oh, that's the one who's so tall." Like I could hear them saying that, So for whatever reason, height seemed to change things for me a little bit. But probably one of the most defining moments for me was in grade 10. There was a leadership kind of course that was being hosted by the province, and each school could send one person, and so I was encouraged to apply for it at my school, and I applied, and for whatever reason, the guidance counselor, one of the counselors at my school, selected me, and I couldn't understand why he did, but he selected me to go out of that year group. And for me, that was a defining moment, because it was the first time that something that I didn't know why I got it, I didn't think I deserved to have it, was given to me. And that opportunity really kind of changed the way in which my life path went, I think.
You were like 15 at the time.
Around that.
Grade?
Yeah.
So basically then you discovered maybe that was something that you wanted to pursue, and that experience, you said, that kind of shifted your life. So, you got, in some way, shape or form, you got probably lucky, which obviously then leaded to you then doing other things. Because, and how would you describe then shifting, your focus? What did you then think differently than you did before, after that leadership course?
Yeah, I think it introduced me to a lot of different people that I otherwise would never have met. It gave me exposure to some things that I didn't necessarily know, but I think most importantly, it gave me some self-confidence.
Okay.
It helped me to recognize that I could aspire to do some interesting and different things that otherwise I would not have thought of. So as a result, on the back of that, I ended up joining, for example, our student council, and eventually it was a 13-year school. So by the end of grade 12, like grade 11, I was then elected as president of my student council, for example. And then in grade 13, I was elected to be kind of like the equivalent of the president of the region. So the region was like 22 high schools.
That's pretty big, I suppose.
It was interesting, but I owe it to that sort of bit of luck that I had, a few years earlier.
And teacher, obviously, who then gave it opportunity to you.
Yeah. And did you have any concrete idea going into high school what you want to do after? Because I guess the American and Canadian maybe school system is very known for that. The focus on extracurriculars, right, and how you basically combine what you do in school and outside of school to then get to uni and further on. So, did you in any way know what to do in order to get to a certain goal after high school?
Yeah, good question. I think my main focus, was following in my dad's footsteps. Okay. So business became sort of the main option that I was sort of entertaining or looking at.
Yeah. Were you helping out your dad at the company?
Not really. It was what he was doing was a bit complex. I was interested, but it was a bit complicated for what I was able to handle at that time. I still started getting into some comp sci stuff, but even then, still, I can't say I spent too much time there. My first job actually was at a place called Canada's Wonderland. It's this massive amusement park in Toronto where I was basically deep frying chicken and so serving fries and deep fried chicken and soda to people.
Shout out Canada.
Shout out amusement park in Toronto.
Yeah. And any hobbies related to computer science and kind of nerdy side of
well, I loved at that time. Yeah. The programming stuff was fairly basic. Like Turing was the name of the code that we used. Java came a little bit later. Yeah. But I would use that to just make like little games. I'd make it for like compound interest calculators. I would code
for econ class.
Sorry, yeah, right,
for the econ class. Exactly. Okay, I got it.
Or like little games, like very very basic video games. I would be able to try and code and those kinds of things. But yeah, it was fun stuff.
Yeah. And while we're still at the topic of high school, just last question, maybe to help out our firsties now who are listening. What's your advice on balancing academics and extracurriculars for, because usually the top end universities of the world, even though that's maybe not the good benchmark to strive towards because sometimes it can be a bit superficial, but what's your advice on balancing academics and extracurriculars?
Yeah, I think that striving to be a well-rounded person is what for me is really important, and it's in all of its sense, morally, spiritually, intellectually, physically, and so in that way, learning and being really good academically, it definitely prepares you for a lot of things, but it only represents a sliver of who you are. Right? And so being able to do things outside the classroom, I think really helps to build your whole self. And so for me, I loved, for example, basketball, volleyball, hockey were the things that I probably did the most of outside the classroom. But then, of course, when I got into student leadership, then that was another kind of big part about what I was engaged in. And I think the things I learned there with my academics really complemented each other. It wasn't a this or that.
Okay, because like usually you have to like let down one thing. That was like what I had to do. I had to let down like one sport, otherwise you can't do everything. But you're saying you can kind of find a common ground.
Well, I think you can find the synergy amongst things. You can see how things come together, and the way I began to envisage things was that, I began to feel that I had a sort of a purpose or a certain kind of drive in a certain sort of direction, and I could channel what I was doing to help me move in that sort of direction. So for me, I became very interested in issues of peace. For example, like global peace and human rights and politics. I became interested in those things, and I could see how those things connected to each other. And then I could find commonality between my world issues course that I was taking or my business studies class that I was taking, and I could see how that combined with my student leadership work, for example.
Yeah,
and
course,
that became a common kind of thing for me. But I did have to let go of some stuff. So for example, I remember the day I was on the volleyball team and the basketball team, and I remember I was elected then as president of student council. And my same guidance counselor, the one who, gave me the opportunity in grade 10, he said to me, do you think you can handle all these things that you're doing? Are you going to be able to do service to all of them equally in the way that you need to? And I thought about it and I said, yeah, I don't think so. So I went to my basketball coach and said, I need to step away from the team. I can't do all of it.
Yeah. Horrible for the team, obviously, losing you as a
well,
player.
I don't think I probably wasn't in the starting lineup or anything, but you could see that he was happy that I had come to that conclusion myself.
Of course.
Because he probably knew that was the right move anyways.
Yeah, no, I think it's always, if you tackle something, you should always tackle probably by 100% or everything you're capable of.
Yeah.
I think just from what you've said, there's like a common theme of leadership throughout your childhood and teenage years, and it makes sense looking at who you are now and what your role is in AC, which it makes sense given your background, all the things that you would engage with back in Canada. Well, now moving on to your uni years later on, you went to Western University, is that right?
Correct.
Were you a party animal? How was that?
I mean, definitely. I do enjoy a bit of a party and a bit of a night out for sure. I still do once in a while, but not as often as it used to be. But definitely, my undergraduate years were great fun. It's my first time living in residence, so something different from you. You've already had that experience now, and you'll probably have it again if you go to university. But for me, that was my first time, and that was an amazing time. We were in rooms of 2 at that time. But you live in this sort of house with a shared washroom and all that kind of stuff. Nowadays, some facilities are a bit more elaborate and those kinds of things, but ours were pretty basic. But that was part of the joy of it. I remember, probably the strangest thing that we did is a group of my friends, we started something called the DWF, the Delaware. That was the name of the house, the Delaware Wrestling Federation.
In my old boys' school, we had that as well. Like with the big boys, we had something. I think we had something similar. Yeah,
and that was silly, but we would, we would have some fun. But
we're going to for the details.
But undergraduate, those first couple of years were really good. You met lots of different people. I had to really work hard to figure out the academics. I was generally speaking a good high school student, but my first year in university, it hit me like a train wreck. Like some of the courses were harder than I thought. And I didn't take them seriously enough, and I just couldn't self-manage properly. Like all of a sudden my routine, this may sound familiar, my routine turned into like a bedtime of 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I couldn't get up until like 10 o'clock in the morning sometimes. And I had 9 o'clock classes. And so I ended up missing a lot of 9 o'clock classes. And it was only until my first set of exams in December, and I almost failed one of my courses, and I was just mortified. Like I could not believe I'd let it come to this. And there's nobody to blame but me. Like,
No.
and so the realization that I was entirely responsible for this really caused me to have to change the way I did things. And that was a good learning exercise for me. And I can only imagine for people like you, having to learn that experience at this age, you're going to be far better prepared for what comes next. For me, I was 19 in university. That's my first time having to self-manage in that kind of way. It wasn't easy, and I got through it, but it was, at some points I was on the cusp of like,
It's also hard not being at home, I feel like then, obviously, because for me, like, the first year of IB was a challenge for me because I've like going for different school systems, like you lose like something all the way. Like there's never something, like you never have the same school system the whole way through. So then when you spoke about like when something hits a train wreck, then it obviously like it gives you like really like a push moment to then like to really work hard. And I think like here it's a really like the harsh experience. If you learn it here, then like your parents are not there or anything. So how do you handle that when your parents weren't there? Did you say like you have to concentrate or?
Yeah, I mean, I was quite independent from my parents. They were quite trusting of me and gave me lots of space in high school and those kinds of things. So in university, yeah, you did feel like it was on you, and being 19, you feel like you're an adult and you need to work this out, right? And luckily, I was able to work it out, but not without some significant kind of strain and stress and pain along the way, which is okay. That was part of the learning for me.
Yeah, and was the university far away from Toronto? Like, your first time living away from parents? And
it was relatively close, so about two and a half hours.
Oh, okay, that's
away.
not that bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and here it says you also have a second bachelor's degree, which is not very usual for a lot of people. So how did that come about? Why didn't you move on to your master's straight away?
Yeah. So to understand that piece, when I finished my first undergraduate degree, I then finally graduated.
Which was in business administration.
In business administration. I had taken the last term and I did an exchange. So I went away to Thailand and to Bangkok, and I did a semester at a university in Thailand. And that then led me to put a backpack on afterwards and basically backpack for 7 months after that. So I was away for a year, 7 months of it, backpacking with my best friend. He was in Japan doing the same exchange. I was in Thailand. I flew to Japan to meet him there at the time of the World Cup. So we went to go watch a couple of World Cup games. I managed to get lucky and get some tickets. And then we basically, without any plan, went essentially by boat, bus, and train from Japan to South Korea to China, and then all the way down through Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and then we finally flew from Singapore to Indonesia. Then went back up to Thailand by bus, and then flew over to India, and then did 6 weeks in India, and then came back home. So that was
that's a big journey.
Yeah, that was huge. It was an amazing that probably in my early adult life, that was probably the most significant experience in my adult life, and that totally changed my career path. That's what caused me to go into education, was after experiencing that, after being in parts of China and India and meeting all these like just incredible people, obviously from the cities and towns that we were visiting. And I met lots of really talented, great young and old business people. And I began asking myself, like, none of these people, or many of them, did not study business, but yet they were clearly successful. So what did I just spend my undergraduate years studying exactly? And so I began having some doubts about what I was doing and those kinds of things. And then I sort of observed what was happening in the world, and I really felt like continuing a career in business, was I potentially contributing to some of the problems that we were seeing in the world? So at that time, I was asking myself the question, what if through business, we are actually setting ourselves down a path of climate disaster, for example?
Yeah.
And in 2002, I was asking myself those questions. And I said, I don't have enough confidence that whatever I do from a business lens, 25 years from then, will be seen as a positive thing. And so I began questioning my path in business. And I said, I think the best thing that I can do is to help to educate young people to make good decisions for themselves and their families and their communities, to be able to make a positive impact in the world. And I felt I could have a multiplier effect that way through the education of younger people. And so that's why I went into education. And so in Canada, a bachelor degree is the way in which you get a qualification to be able to teach. So that's why I went back and did a 1-year bachelor degree.
Oh, you only did 1 year.
Yeah,
okay.
it was a 1-year thing that then gave me the accreditation, you could say, to be able to teach, which is then what I did.
Yeah, I think it's very symbolic what you're saying, because in a way that very transformative experience that ultimately led you to a path of education and career path of just teaching and engaging with schools and all sort of like that type of institutions instead of business. And nowadays you're sort of in charge, or you're occupying a role in an institution which basically has to do with exposing, like it all was brought about by you. Like it was all brought about by you sort of going abroad and leaving your home and your background, and now AC in a way it's somehow like that, I think, but in a bigger scale, if that makes sense.
That's why I feel very much at home here.
Yeah,
in many
it's
ways,
like coming
right?
full circle.
Yeah, and I feel like my past experiences have allowed me to at least feel like I can connect or understand lots of young people, regardless of where you're from or your circumstance. I feel like I've been fortunate to be able to have opportunities that have allowed me to experience lots of different things that have prepared me in some way, in small ways, for this role.
Yeah, I thought it really amazing. Maybe we can quickly jump back to the backpacking story. Maybe just one short story on like what was like something like that you will like always remember from that backpacking story. Because I've heard some people are thinking about backpacking in the gap year as well. So maybe what's like one amazing story maybe you could tell us here about the backpacking journey you did?
Yeah, there were lots, but probably one of the ones that stands out for me the most is in when I was in China. We had gone in the typical kind of big city path that people would take. And remember, this is like in 2002, so it's a while ago.
Yeah, we weren't even born then.
But we basically went from big city to big city, and forgive me if I mispronounce, but went from Beijing to Shanghai to Beijing to Xi'an to Chengdu, to a bit of time in the mountains, and then down to Kunming in the south. And then from there we said, okay, look, we've just been in big cities. So we said, let's do something different. We went to the bus station and we said, we're going to close our eyes, point on the map, and wherever we end up pointing, we're going to catch the next bus to that location. And the only deal is that we have to have never heard of this town. We can know nothing about it. It cannot be written up in our books that we have about China. There can be nothing that we know about it. So we found a place. I believe I'm pronouncing it Guizhou. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but that's the place that we end up going to, about 3 hours away from Kunming, heading south. And so we went there. And obviously didn't know anybody. We were on the bus. Some person walked past us, roughly our age, and he said hello to us. And we said hello. We said, oh great, we're going to meet him when we get off this bus. So we got off the bus and we found him and we said hello to him. And his English name was Alan. So we talked to Alan. We said, Alan, do you know anywhere that we can stay, in this town? He's like, well, this is my town. Sure, follow me. I'll take you. So he took us to a hotel, helped us to get settled in. We said, can we take you out for dinner to thank you for helping us out? He's like, no problem. So he takes us to a restaurant. We go there, he takes off, comes back half an hour later, all changed and everything. And we said, okay, can we have the bill to pay? He's like, no, I've already paid for it. You're my guests. You can't. And I said, wow, this is incredible. Wow, so then he's like, let me take you around the town. Takes us around the town, which was great.
Of course, lucky with someone from there who speaks your language as well.
It was
perfect, I suppose.
It was great, and ended up meeting a bunch of great people after that, and came back, and they saw us off to the bus station a couple of days later, and just it's a memory of kindness and of spontaneity that sticks with me as a lesson of just what it means to be kind to strangers, what it means to take a bit of a risk and not always believe that the planned route is the best, that sometimes leaving room for spontaneous things to happen in life is important and helpful. I remember those lessons.
That's amazing. Okay, just going on completely backwards, just back to school, unfortunately.
Taking back to school, it's okay.
So after you got that 1 year degree of education, so you went to straight to teaching, or was the master's already in your head?
Yeah, so I got some great advice from one of my mentors at University of British Columbia, where I did that bachelor degree in education, and he said to me, doing a bachelor of education or being a qualified teacher is a vocation, but it doesn't teach you the degree of responsibility on your shoulders when you educate young people, because you don't yet know how to interrogate knowledge. You don't quite understand the magnitude of being the person who is selecting what you teach or how you teach it, the impact that can have. So he encouraged me to do a master's degree. So I went straight from there to what is now University College London, what's called the Institute of Education in London, and did a master's degree there, which was a wonderful experience, very different to my other educational experiences, but really taught me how to think in a different kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the last master's degree was then?
So then after teaching in Kenya for a number of years, I felt like I wanted to do a sort of another bit of learning. And so I was fortunate to go to Columbia University, a teacher's college there, and do a 2 summers master's degree at Columbia, which was, again, a wonderful experience to be able to do that.
And at what age did you end up finishing school in the end?
I mean, but you did work in Kenya.
I did.
In between, of course.
Yeah. So with that last degree, I think I was, I want to say, 36 or something when I finished that degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
And after that?
And after that, I have not gone back to do another sort of formal qualification in university. I've been thinking about it, but it's a bit hard as you get a little bit older with time, because with a young family, with a great job that I have and role that I want to put all of myself into, you weigh off you trade off things, right? And at this moment in time, I'd rather spend discretionary time with my kids.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Makes perfect sense.
You should.
Another question, maybe, what would you be doing if you weren't a principal now?
Principal of AC.
Yeah, principal of AC.
I start my own business.
Okay.
So your own business. Okay. So there is this entrepreneurship gene in you, I would say. So would you ever, because the response came pretty quickly, would you ever want to start your own business maybe in in a few years' time? I don't know, when there is more time in your life, would you ever want to start like a own business? Do you want to maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, look, the thought still crosses my mind. I don't think I would do it at this moment in time, but who knows what the future holds. But I'm still very interested in the tech side of things. So I am fascinated by the AI side of things. So that's probably if I ever were to do something in the sort of 10-year time horizon or whatever, it'd probably be in that.
So the tech spectrum, I suppose.
In that space somewhere, but it's got to have a social and moral kind of purpose. Like that's got to be key. A key part of how I choose to spend my time, because what I do right now I feel like is the most deeply of moral endeavors. Educating a young people is one of the most deeply moral things that you can do, and it brings me tremendous satisfaction. So I'm not looking to trade off satisfaction, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah, I get what you mean.
We actually wanted to ask you about AI and new technologies in regards to education and life in general. So with the increasing integration of technology in education and overall life, what do you think is the best way to go about including these new technologies such as AI into the classroom and just everyday life?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's hard to see, right? Because what AI is today is not going to be what it is a year from now or 5 years from now, right? So that's where it's hard to have a sense of where it's going. That's one of the main challenges. But what I think is that it can be a really helpful tool for a lot of things in learning, especially being able to cater things in a way that is most helpful for an individual in terms of how you learn and what you learn. But what I think is a huge risk is where we rely on AI to not allow us to develop our own abilities, and we use it as a crutch or as a hook in some way that prevents us from developing ourselves, which it can do, right? It's like the equivalent of asking your older brother or sister to do the work for you.
Of course, yeah.
Right? You can ask them, the prompt, you can ask them what to do, right? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, what you end up doing is stifling yourself. And what I worry about in this sort of, in a dystopian kind of way, is 20 years from now, 19 generations of graduates who actually have lowered their overall intelligence because they just have had shortcuts.
Of course.
Had to, right? So that's sort of what I worry about. But yeah.
How do you think you can tackle that? Do you think there is any specific way in which you can regulate that, or just institutions or anything?
That's a hard one, right? That's a hard one. I mean, I think it's by helping people to understand the downside, the self-development downsides, right, of overly relying on it. While I understand the motivations, the incentives are so high to use it if you need to, because the stakes feel like they're so high sometimes, right? When it comes to assessment or it comes to getting into university, I can understand what drives people to want to rely on it, because if they believe it can do a better job than they can in producing something that will give them a ticket to the next stage of their life, for example, right? I get it. And that's hard, right? That's hard. And how do you not sell out the long term for the short term, right? And human beings, we're just not good at that calculation, right? We're not good at that calculus, the short term payoff with the long-term loss. Like, that's a hard thing for us to figure out. So I don't envy the situation a lot of you are in, because you have such easy access to it, and it's such a difficult choice. But I would encourage you to think about the long term and not to shortchange your own growth and development, because that's what I worry, at least at this moment in time, can happen with the over-reliance on AI.
Yeah. And were you thinking of introducing any courses on AI or how to work with it into the school? Because I think that's something that will be very important going into the future, knowing how to work efficiently with the AI to squeeze as much out of it, I think.
Yeah, I think how to use it as like in a practical way and how not to use those kinds of things. Absolutely. And I agree that's something that we can do there. And I think, it being a co-constructed thing with students would be really helpful there. I think the skills that underpin what makes a good companion to AI as a person are a lot of the underlying skills that the IB diploma already builds anyways. If you think about, whether it be in your TOK class or your Lang and Lit class, for example, the way in which you evaluate claims, the way in which you look at multiple perspectives, the way you ask good questions, the way you learn to interrogate what you receive and understand what evidence looks like, those kinds of skills are the same ones you need, at least in today's age, even as you engage with AI. So the baseline skills are still being developed, which I don't think should stop, if that makes sense. In addition to what you're suggesting, the ways in which we focus a bit more deeply on how you can use AI well, for example.
And moving on from that, because we don't have that much time, but we wanted to ask you, on another note, what do you think are the current most pressing issues at AC? I know it's a very general and complicated question, but I don't know, anything you would like to share maybe
from your perspective?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I think some of the most pressing issues implies sort of challenges, right? I think there's also, so I'll frame it as opportunities and some challenges, right? So from an opportunities standpoint, I think that we are so fortunate to be where we are. In Wales, on this tremendous site with this tremendous community. For me, the opportunities are, how do we engage more with our wider community? How do we continue to see ourselves as part of that community? How do we bring the wider community in? How do we have more of an impact as we go out? How do we continue to develop the systems transformation pathway, which is something that I think will really help to add to the sort of global sort of totality of education of what exists out there. I see lots of continued opportunities on a personal level for each of you as individuals to be able to be the best that you can collectively and individually. Some of the challenges that I see is around well-being and pace and people taking care of themselves, students taking care of themselves as they do what they do. I think we've had a really good and healthy focus on safeguarding and ensuring that our behaviors that we have, I mean in a big way, not in a small way, our behaviors are healthy and positive and good for us, that allow us to be good role models, that allow us to then actually engage with some of the really important work in the world that is needed of us around issues of peace and sustainability. How do we ensure we have the capacity, the bandwidth, the fortitude to be able to engage and handle those bigger and broader reasons why this school exists in its first place. So those are some things that I see at this moment in time. What do you see?
Well, I feel the roof. No, of course that's not the most pressing issue. But I think issues at AC, as you said, I think what will be an issue in the future is always staying as diverse as you are. I think that will always be difficult because, as we already see now, we have I feel always getting those people to the same spot, that will maybe be a challenge due to, I don't know, maybe people won't be as interested as they are now, but I think keeping the UWC movement going, I think that is probably also a challenge. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's really important, and I think the diversity piece, as you mentioned, is critically important, right? And I think we have really good ways to ensure we continue to have really strong national diversity. I think the two areas that we need to continue to work on is our gender balance, right?
Yeah.
That's one domain that's a challenge right now that we need to work on at a systems level, and the second is socioeconomic, right? That's also another one, and for that we rely tremendously on our very generous alumni and parent community to help us with that.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one, because it also has to do with how the structural sort of jurisdiction of the school, and how the funding and all of those things that are ultimately not up to a lot of the staff that work here, and obviously not the students. So, because in comparison to other UWCs, of course, the way the funding works is very different, very complicated. We're not going to get into that, but it does shape a lot of the student body and ultimately the student culture and how the school develops on its own. And I think, I don't certainly know if in the past it was significantly different, but I do think there's sort of been a sort of maybe a change in the student body and student culture in the past decade or so. I don't know.
Yeah, that definitely would be, I think, is true. Definitely if you compare to the 70s and 80s and so on, compared to today, for sure. But it's also a little bit different as well. And maybe we can do another podcast on UWC.
Next time.
Yeah. What would be like the one thing you'll be like to known for as after your term as a principal of AC? Like the one impact?
I think really helping to reshape the conversation around what education needs to be and should be for the generations of students that come today and after you, and how they are best equipped to help to manage the challenges in the decades ahead that we're going to be facing as a world. And I think education needs significant change, and I'm hoping that I can play some small role in helping to do that. That's what stands out for me in my mind. In addition to, of course, the individual, personal connection and contact and ability to support all of you in what you do. That is equally important to me.
Earlier, you obviously mentioned you have a family, so would you send your children to a UWC if you had the opportunity?
100%.
100%.
No doubt.
Okay. Okay, that's obviously that's strong and I think a good answer.
Anyone in particular?
Like any UWC, yeah, good question. Like any UWC stands out. I mean, they're all beautiful.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not gonna lie. I think all the time about my two boys coming here. Like that's
it's a beautiful place.
That's a very common, place. And I can, but at the same time, I'd be guided by them, and so they may say like, look, I lived X number of years of my life already there, so I've already had that experience. Maybe, maybe you go somewhere else. Maybe Costa Rica. Maybe
it's also
maybe Japan. Maybe who knows?
It's a bit different weather in Costa Rica than here, I suppose. The beach is a bit warmer. The beach is a bit nicer.
One of my kids likes warm, one likes cold. So.
So wrapping up now, as Tel didn't want to ask the last question. So this is a signature question of our podcast. What is for you the meaning of success?
I think the meaning of success for me is one about being content and fulfilled, whatever that means in whatever it is that a person is doing. But it's also about doing the best that you can to take care of yourself and others around you. And that could extend to your country, it could extend to a region, it could extend to, whatever that might be. But being self-minded in some ways, that's normal, but also being other-minded and doing the best that you can in that domain. Sometimes in my mind, I extend that to a profession, or I extend it to, what I do as my kind of career. But that's a sliver of it. Fundamentally, it's about being a good human being and thinking about others deeply as we engage in what we do.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for coming, Naheed.
You're a great principal. We really appreciate you having you here. We appreciate you, being
taking
here with us
time.
today.
Taking the time to come down here today.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. The respect is mutual.
Thank you.
See you in the
Amazing
canteen.
conversation. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Thank you.